Wow, what a room. Yeah, I've been anticipating this room for, I don't know, since maybe April. So what I'm present to right now is actually silence. Silence, to me, represents an enormous canvas, a canvas that I could paint anything on. So in this room right now, I feel like I have a canvas of possibility. Possibility of connecting with all of you that are in here, all that are listening in different spaces, here in the building and outside in Houston. And the possibility of connecting through my words, through my actions, and having the result of resonance. Now, what I'm also present to are the 20 million thoughts running through my head right now. Actually a little bit worse than normal because, just coming onto the stage and being with you in this new space. And I know that each one of you have many, many thoughts, maybe more thoughts today than you normally have because you're being exposed to so many different ideas and there's a lot of processing that's going on. It doesn't change that we've got thousands of thoughts right now converged in one space. Thoughts that represent our unique points of view called perspective. Perspective that comes from perception, and perception that comes from beliefs. Each one of our own individual belief systems that were cultivated long ago in our childhoods based on what we experienced, based on what we were taught directly and indirectly, all of which fuel back into our thoughts, many of which we don't even notice. Now, currently living in Houston, I work on a daily basis in a global environment with people from around the world. Growing up, I grew up in a very multicultural environment. And I am absolutely an artistic person. I think you got that as an opera singer and a classical musician at the piano. So I've always listened. I've always been on the side of really enjoying listening to people. But you know what I discovered a few years ago? I listen to people speak, but I'm not really hearing them. So on another day, I'd love to talk to you about all the auditory processes that go on for listening. But what I want to focus on today very much has to do with the definition of resonance, that is, being heard. I have to say, I don't think I've heard people from their worlds, and it's only recently, the last couple of years, that I think I have practiced enough to be able to maintain that to where now I'm starting to hear more. So what do I mean by being heard? The way that I perceive being heard has very much to do with understanding what someone tells me, not from my view, but from their view, what words mean to them. So what I've discovered in this huge world that's getting smaller by the day is that the divide between us just gets bigger and bigger. And a part of the reason for that divide growing has very much to do with how we listen and how we hear. Are we really hearing what people are saying from their view? And once we've heard it, are we able to rise above what we think about that, to stand in a space of silence internally to accept them? And inside of that acceptance, to create respect. And it's that alignment that I believe creates the polarity through which true resonance occurs. So, in this slide, very much, I would say, represents how I have felt throughout the course of my life until very recently, especially growing up in that diverse environment. I always felt like one tiny little drop of water surrounded by other drops of water that somehow hadn't come together. And as I listen to the conversations around me, I see people trying to converge, but we are still working on getting there. Well, I want to take you back to some of the conversations I was present to growing up. I grew up on the border of El Paso, Texas, and Juarez, in a very tight-knit Middle Eastern community. My family is Syrian. And within that very tiny subculture, I grew up in a larger subculture of the Mexican community. So at home, I learned you are Arabic, you are this, you are that. And I loved to go to my friends' homes that were Mexican because while we had many of the same ideas, they were expressed in different ways, and I felt freer to be me. And then within those two subcultures, we were completely embraced by America, of course. And that was a very unique experience. I didn't really feel as though I could connect inside of those realms. I was trying to fit in. But, it's impossible to fit in when you have, for example, I remember this one time that my grandfather picked me up. And I love my grandfather. I learned courage from him. And so he came, he was in his pajamas to pick my sister and I up from school in an overcoat and a fedora, hadn't shaved. And he's half leaning out the window from 2 miles away, leaning on his horn, shouting my name, Mariam, Anahani, I'm here. And I'm in the front of the school, all of the school population, and I'm just there, and I just walked across the street to get in the car, and I thought, I'm a single drop of water. And I realized how hard it was to cross those bridges. So I did something. I really started to internalize my voice. I stopped speaking because I got tired of bumping up against a wall when I would say something where people would understand me from their view and not even hear what I was saying. So I just figured, what's the point? So I was lucky. I had parents who did listen, and I begged them, please, can I have piano lessons? Can I have piano lessons? And they did. They gave me piano lessons. And it was at the piano that I found my voice. And I found that I could connect to people without words because I could be all of me at the keyboard, and I had a voice. And I could freely express myself there. And it's really in retrospect that I realized that the first miracle that I had on this journey of transformation to be heard, that I learned the first important lesson, and it was from my mother. She would listen to what I was playing and how I was playing it to understand what was going on in my world, because I wouldn't tell her in words. And based on that, inside of her internal silence and my internal silence, we connected in a different way. And she heard me. And so the first lesson I get about being heard is you must, like life or death, commitment, be willing to hear someone beyond your own view. So it doesn't start with my wanting to be heard. It starts with my being willing to be heard. Well, I had a lot of miracles in my life. Another one was a car accident. I would have spent all my life behind a keyboard, totally content to do so. And I had some injuries, and I was pretty hard-headed at that time and kept playing despite those injuries until excruciating pain made me stop. And I had to step out from behind the keyboard, and that was painful because I felt like I lost my voice, I lost my expression. But it forced me to embrace my own internal voice. And for the first time, I understood resonance in a very organic way. As I built this complex machine that is my voice, I started to understand what it was to be a sound wave, what it was to be resonance in motion. And for the first time, instead of connecting to my audience from the side of me through my music, it forced me to stand and look at my audience and embrace them. Embrace them inside of who I am, but from an internal space of silence. And so I learned there the second lesson about being heard. And that is to embrace, to rise above whatever reactions that we have when we see different situations in order to embrace those around us. And another miracle, I totally out of the blue was happy in music, loved what I was doing in music, loved performing, loved training other musicians. And I had a global company, an international oil and gas company, invite me to create a program to help their international employees gain more resonance, to connect through words. And I thought, wow, that's weird. Okay, so I guess I must be listening in a different way to where I'm finally being heard. And it forced me to harness what I'm about to share with you, that I think is an important aspect of the learning to be heard. And that was, I realized I had built myself as the instrument of communication to cross that divide between people. And in building the instrument, you could have a piano that sits there silently. We need somebody to play it, and to play it beautifully, to create something as being touching or moving or inspiring where connection can occur. And so what I started to work with people on was the analogy that we indeed are the very instrument of communication. And it's how we play that instrument that will dictate how we connect. So I looked high and low for a picture of a piano. And I thought, well, maybe a piano key, the mechanism of that. And I decided on this picture. To me, this represents all of what music is to me and all of what communication is. Absolute color, individual colors that mesh and merge together and move together in a pattern to create infinite possibility. And I love that it's on a Baldwin. For a time in college, I sold Baldwins. And they are amazing pianos. The way that they're built is specific to the type of sound wave that can be created from it, the colors that can be drawn from it. And so I would ask you to think about, what is it that I would need to do to build myself as an instrument that could communicate? Well, connecting back to thoughts, for me, it began very much with the first step of, oh my gosh, there are so many thoughts. What do I actually believe? Why do I believe that? Do I choose to believe that? How is that belief serving me today to create a conscious choice of what that belief is? And from there, how it totally shifted all of my thoughts. And so building the instrument very much has to do with, we've got to do the work on an individual level to create that internal space. Otherwise, it's impossible to hear past what we ourselves think. Well, that piano could sit there, as I mentioned, but it requires someone to play it. I could go and plunk down a key, but that doesn't mean I'm going to make beautiful music. I could have a cat walk across the keys and you'd hear sound. But that wouldn't necessarily touch you, move you, connect with you. And so it's in the process of learning to play the instrument that you're building. Actually being in the situation of your communication with all of the people in our diverse city. Could be the postal worker, could be the waiter that's really frustrating you, could be your manager, it could be your husband, it could be your wife, it could be your child. I practice a lot on my children. Poor things. Anyways, so the thing is, we've got to practice. And what I started with, practice from internal silence first. And then I would ask myself, well, what is it that I'm actually hearing? And the other day I asked my little boy, I was like, do you understand, Mommy? What do you hear? And he blinked up at me and said, I hear words, Mommy. I said, okay, I got it. And I was like, what do you understand? So it's, what am I understanding from what's being said? What am I accepting? And am I respecting? And I really work on practicing that on a daily basis and performing it. And it's not just a bunch of theory. So I'm actually in a space at this point in my life where I finally feel like that. Like a tidal wave, like a waterfall. I'm no longer one tiny individual drop of water. And it started with me being willing to listen to others from the diversity of their world. To not make them wrong for it, to just really accept it as one point in the infinite possibility that exists. And it's absolutely real. And I respect them in the reality of that. And sometimes I fail. And so I go back to the practice room and I think about, why did that just derail? And I don't wait to blame it on somebody else. So how this is playing out in real life is, I've had the opportunity to create an amazing team with a really good friend of mine. And the reason I want to exemplify this is we are complete opposites. So Peter is 60 and I'm 38. Peter is a man and I am a woman. So we think very differently, we speak very different languages just based on those two things alone. Peter is from Holland. He was raised in Dutch culture. I grew up inside of a Middle Eastern community, inside of a Mexican community, inside of America, and I've taken a little bit of that and thrown in some extra cultural things from other places that I like. Now, I am an absolute free thinker, creative, kind of, I think in circular motion. I exist in circular motion. Peter exists in linear motion. So if you watch what happens, there's always a point where there's convergence. And at first, that convergence didn't happen. And as we started to listen to each other from internal silence, that point of convergence came closer and closer until there was resonance. And it was as just the same feeling as when I have a perfect sound wave that's coming out of my body into an audience and reacting in the room acoustically. It just blossomed from there. And it's fun to work together. It's not a fight. We do not fight like cats and dogs. And that's really come into the view of a lot of the people that we work with, a lot of the clients that we work with, our family and our friends. So we mastered it there more so than in the rest of the world, and now we're both practicing that everywhere else in life. So we worked on building ourselves as the instrument of communication to cross all of those differences. And on a daily basis, we practice the performance of being the musician that would draw out that resonance. I know for me, I want to be a Stradivarius. I mean, it still can't be replicated how they built that violin, okay, how they built all of those violins, but it does stand that they create the most amazing sound. But it requires someone who understands how to play it. I could pick up a Stradivarius, not being a violinist, and it would sound horrible. You'd run. And then you could get someone that is an amazing violinist, and they could play it, and it would make you weep. And that's what I'm talking about. That connectivity inside of resonance. And when you accomplish it between people, it will make you weep because it's so beautiful. So, looking at all of the definitions of resonance, they all had one thing in common. In every discipline, resonance is a verb. So what I would leave you with today is realizing that we are resonance in motion, but it begins with me. I am resonance in motion. I am the cause of the effect that is sound wave, that is resonance. And together, we can create a beautiful song. So leaving here today, what type of vibration are you willing to be the cause of in life here in Houston? Thank you so much. Thank you.